Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And today we will be exploring a very interesting topic. And this is specifically when it comes to behavior. Now, wouldn't we all want to know quite a lot more about behavior? And I must let you know that it is a topic that really allows us to understand ourselves and understand people around us, because as human beings, people are the others we always communicate with. I have with me today Coach Prem with Action Coach Guyana, and Nagi Bihilak from AccuMatch, and he's located in Canada. Welcome, guys. Welcome, Prem. Welcome, Nagi.
Thanks, Vishnu. Yeah, glad to be here. It's awesome.
Very good, very good. So I know that we will be sharing a bit more information on Nagi as well. But to really kick us off today will be Coach Prem, who will be sharing a little bit more about his journey so far. So, and to everyone who's joining us on Zoom as well live, I would like to encourage you to put any questions into the chat box. If you have, make a note or put them immediately into the chat box, you will have the opportunity as well to ask any questions towards the end of the session, when we would have really been able to go over what AccuMatch is all about. But make sure that you do that. And for those persons who are following us on social media right now, the Facebook pages, the YouTube channels, make a note there. We are tracking those channels as well, so that if we need to bring any questions into the Zoom room, we'll do so. And if you are watching this afterwards, still put in your questions. We will do our best to make sure that every single one is answered. And if the content is really valuable to you today, please ensure that you share it so that more people can benefit. And with that, I would now like to ask Prem to take us through the initial part of the session. Coach Prem.
All right, so thank you, Vishnu. It has been a pleasure for me to talk about this tool that you introduced me to. Actually, you introduced me to AccuMatch, and I was immediately drawn to it because of the slant it has. I was exposed to other assessments, but this assessment really helped me to focus on specific behaviors that I would have been displaying, but I haven't really seen it for myself. So to be able to have an assessment where I was able to look at my work behaviors and the attitudes that I had gave me this sense of awareness that this is actually where I am, and this is the results, and this is what is affecting my reality. I was in a place, well, my personal story is I grew up in a family business and still in a family business. And the dynamics of being in a family business it has its uniqueness about it. And as a second generation business owner, it is somewhat of a challenge to rise above when it comes to leadership, because you grew up in an environment, I don't know how many of you can relate, but you grew up in an environment where your parents are there and they're the ones that are directing you. And for those of you who grew up in organizations, you would have leaders above you. And one of it casts my attention back to a video that I did about reality. Who really is our bosses? And our bosses really is reality. It's not Mr. Smith or Mr. Prasad or whoever it is. It doesn't have a name. It's really reality. And reality is really what we are actually producing. What are the results that we're actually having in our lives? And this tool is what really helps me to understand the results that I was getting. So a little bit about my story. I grew up in a family business, and most of you would have known it's a local family business here in Guyana, furniture store. And one of the challenges that I faced was this ability to execute, to actually get stuff done. because being in a family business, you have the authority, people are there, they respect you and so forth. But actually to go out on your own and actually get stuff done is something that for some of us, need to learn, because we grew up in a sheltered environment. It's sometimes difficult. Remember, if you can reflect back to the story of the Garden of Eden, when you would have, the children growing up there, it's really about not protecting them. It's about giving them something to protect themselves. And for parenting, this is a parenting lesson as well. We want to be able to bring our children up in a way that they can be able to protect themselves. Now, that wasn't the only challenge. There was a challenge with team. Now, I'm responsible for a few things now at the business. There's a team that we have to work with, and to be able to understand how that team work, because what is happening is they are really pulling from my behaviors, because my behaviors will affect their attitude. And that is what happens in family and organizations. We tend to have behaviors that actually flow into the environment, and the environment now is a result of the leader. So we have to be aware of that. All right, so that was a little bit about my story. Another thing and another key point that Akimat really helped me with, and this is with Maggie. I had a few sessions with Maggie, and I'll introduce him in a few minutes. But one of the biggest things that I got from his session is to realize who I am. Now, if you remember the story of the Lion King, you would have remembered Simba, and Simba's father died. And what happened to him? His leader actually, for the family, actually died. What happened to Simba? Simba actually had to leave, and he went into the wilderness, met his friends, Hakuna Matata, so forth. But it came to a point where he had to find who he is. And we had Rafiki coming in, and he hit him on his head, and he saw his father, and his father reminded him this particular statement, if you could remember who you are. So it comes to a point in everyone's life that you have to be able to face reality and remember who you are, to be able to be a blessing, to be able to be someone of value, to be able to contribute to society or contribute to the persons that you're responsible for, is something that is key and something that gives each and every individual tremendous joy. So that is a little bit about me. The Akimatch assessment is something that helps me to look at my behaviors on an objective level, something that I can look at an assessment and see what my behaviors are in the working environment. Now, there are many tests out there. There's the DISC assessment. There is so many other assessments, and all are good. They're good. But the unique thing about Akimatch, it breaks it down specifically to specific behaviors, and this is what will help individuals in their lives, how they operate, and to be able to identify: am I being assertive? Am I being passive? So these are things that we will discuss today, so that you can be able to have a better understanding of how Akimatch can really help you in your life and in your organization. So I will take the opportunity it's my pleasure to introduce to you the founder. So as I say, the person who initiated the Akimatch assessment, and he'll tell us a little bit about, what's the story behind it, and why did he do this assessment and produce this assessment to be able to help others. He was a coach an action coach as well, and he has been in behavioral science for maybe over 15 years. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Nagi, Mr. Nagi. Hey, over to you.
Thanks, Prem. Yeah, that's great. Just listening to your story again, it's such a nice journey that you and your family have been through, and the things that you guys have done. In terms of the background, if you like, a little bit about how we got here. I think you've touched a little bit on some of the other assessment tools, and I ran a coaching firm for 10 years, and we saw a lot of challenges and a lot of experiences that both business owners and coaches struggled with. And there just wasn't anything that allowed us to go deep enough to be able to truly understand what's going on. And the reality that it came to is really this. And I was just going to put a couple of slides up to help with the visuals of this. Let me see if it's going to work the way I need it. You can see my slides okay? Yes, good. Yeah, so, it came down to this one thing that I think is, the word behavior is really a simplification of the last 40 years of neuroscience and advancements that we've seen in both psychology, behavior, cognitive behavior, and so forth. So the research that we did and all the testing really came down to this one word, which simplified everything when we finally realized, hey, it all comes down to behavior. The brain, the way the brain works, it's really, we observe, we take in information, we process it, and we respond. So if there isn't anything to observe, there is no behavior. There's really just thinking, dreaming, all these other things that happen when we're not doing anything. But even those could be behaviors, What I'm doing right now is a behavior. What you were doing a few seconds ago is a behavior. Everybody on this room, on this event today, is actually watching that and interpreting that behavior and taking it in and saying, hey, how do I take this? Do I judge it, or am I open to listening? And one of the things that we've learned is when people are judging something, they actually stop listening. So it's a great learning that we didn't really realize just how powerful that is. When you go to an event, a conference, a great speaking engagement, wherever it is, if we're not just open to receiving the information and we start judging, we miss a lot of information. So the more and more we dug into behavior, the more we realized we just didn't have enough information to understand what happens between the taking in the information and processing and then responding. Okay, and that's where Acumat started to evolve. It actually evolved at the beginning as a recruitment system. We were trying to help business owners with getting the right people on the team based on how people think in terms of the role they're in. So that was really interesting. But what we discovered later on is this became actually a self-development tool. And coaches use it, leaders use it, and we're seeing the application in many different areas. The challenges that we saw were, there was a long list, so I just grabbed 4 here. People, get to the end of the day and they wonder what happened to the day. They failed to accomplish the things that they wanted to do. So what happened? And so we through the Acumat's map can now understand what goes on as a natural process that each of us go through. So if you like, we have unconscious patterns and we have conscious thinking. And it's the unconscious patterns that get in the way. Right? Being stuck, we often hear of business owners and leaders saying, I'm lacking my vision, or I don't know where I'm going, I'm kind of stuck. And so I'll touch on some of those points in the map today just to talk about, what does stuck really mean? What sort of unconscious patterns are showing up in that? Fear of change, COVID has been a great opportunity for a lot of people to change. But, if you look around you, everybody's just going back to the way they were, right? Was it a fear of change, or was it just the normal patterns that we are so comfortable with? The other phrase of fear of change, it's fear of the unknown, okay? And so when we know something, it becomes our norm, we'd rather go to that rather than focus on something new. It's the unknown factor. And a lot of people just wanted to get back to normal, right? Team challenges, how we engage. I think we were talking a little bit about that earlier on. How do we react to other people? Are we triggered? Are we triggered positively, or triggered negatively? How do I communicate with someone if I don't understand really to a greater extent how they receive information? I could judge them. I could be biased. I could be, filtering information out and interpreting it in the wrong way. So all of this came out of, a decade or more of research before we launched this product back in 2017. So it's only been a few years, but we've seen so many applications to this. So Accumatch maps the behavior. Why is that important? So we don't map your neural pathways. It's very hard for us to do that. We don't do an MRI, but the map is like a MRI of your behavior. And so when you start to then become curious about where does this behavior come from, what thinking created that behavior, you become aware. How did I get this? When did I get this? Is it useful? Is it resourceful, or is it limiting? All of this discussion really comes out of all of that. And through questions, then we can go deeper. But what's more important is we can laser focus the points on the pattern that show up that we go, I think this one is getting in my way. What does that mean? How do I work with that? It's an unconscious pattern that I keep doing this, and I don't realize till afterwards. And I don't want to look at it after the effect. I want to catch myself during. So it laser focuses the questions so we can go deeper into understanding ourselves. Well, in coaching, it's to help business owners understand themselves. And so, in fact, I just thought I'd put up one quick case study. We'll look at some maps. Prem, you guide me through, how much of this you want me to cover. I know you have some questions lined up for me, so we'll touch on to those. This was just a simple example of a business owner before getting into a leadership understanding. We call it leadership behavior intelligence, leadership BI. This person was very controlling. It's hard to probably see on those graphs. Very demanding and confrontational with a lot of the team members. And when we mapped it, we then were able to help that person work through those factors. And it came down to, the biggest one, I can't use my mouse on here, is in the top right, on the left-hand side was the level of initiation, but also the control. Okay, so when they reduced their control and allowed people to do things and gave more freedom, they were actually surprised at just how much better results they were getting. And so we were able to map his pattern before the program and after the program, so he could see that shift and change. And we see that quite a lot. Change happens, you'd be surprised, rather quickly. When people know what to focus on, they're not fixed. We're constantly learning, growing, and changing. We just sometimes get these labels thrown at us that cause us to think that we are fixed, and becomes an excuse to keep acting that way rather than looking for, what do I need to learn in order to shift? So, yeah, that's just a quick background. And, if you like, I can, throw up a map or two for us to look at. Prem, what do you think? Is that appropriate?
Yep, that'll be good. But by the meanwhile, one of the things that really draw me to Akimatch as well is employee engagement as well. And employee engagement, when employees are not engaged within the organization, there's a cost that is attached to that. And if we can be able to map those individuals and understand how they behave and pinpoint specific behaviors, and that is the beauty about Akimatch. Because I've, in other assessments, in my perception is that it tend to put labels on individuals. It's like, you're like this and you're like that. But the Akimatch assessment, it tells you the different behaviors, and it just breaks it down a little bit more in detail, right? So you are a certain profile, but there's so many other behaviors that you need to look at. And when you can be able to see it in front of you, then you can be able to make the adjustments. So, and that is one of the things in terms of employee engagement, and even yourself to be aware of it. It helps you to be able to engage. Another point as well, as you were talking, I remember one of the key things is environment. The environment that you place yourself in, because when I was at my previous, my family business, there's a certain environment there. And the moment I remove myself and place myself in another environment, that environment challenged me. And there was a different type of behavior showing up. So that was so fascinating to be able to understand how we show up when we are in different environments. So it is so key to be aware of your behaviors, because it's not something that you can see, it's something others see in you. And this here is an objective, it's a questionnaire, and it's an objective assessment of how you show up within a particular environment. So your environment is key. Yes, Maggie.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Do you have the map, the other assessment?
You see that? Right. So I'm just going to show some samples. This isn't a complete assessment or report, but I just wanted to show, first of all, we're able to, I know that's a bit small, let me just make that a bit bigger, right? We're able to map individuals against a benchmark. And, I think, when you talked about the environment before, the benchmark is sometimes the culture within the organization. Here, I'm just using a benchmark, which is just general population. So we can actually compare an individual to how they respond to people in general. Or we can benchmark a particular role. Let's say business owners in a supply industry, right? We could create a benchmark like that and then compare the business owners to that. You can compare individual team members to each other. So, an example here is comparing, two people together to see how they communicate, how they interact, and it very quickly highlights the areas where they are similar and the areas where they are different. It's visual, it's instant, allows us to jump straight into those areas where there might be some conflict, or areas where they are so similar that they both might miss some great opportunities because they both see things through the same lens. Right? Even mapping larger teams. This one is quite complex, but the idea isn't to just look at the outliers, but to look for patterns. And there is a much greater interest in the pattern that was showing up down the bottom here that turned out to be the blind spots for this group, for this organization. So very interesting when you look at all the different possibilities with these maps.
Yep. One of the things that I was just reminded of as well is, some leaders, they tend to delegate, and as they get a task, they don't look at the details and they just pass it on. So automatically they are, just in this phase of anything that comes into my lap, I'll just pass it on to an individual without even looking at the details of and how this will actually affect us. So as leaders, this is the dilemma sometimes we fall into, and we believe that everything now becomes just an automatic delegate to that person or delegate to that person.
So Prem, it sounds like since you're describing me so accurately there, I would ask maybe Maggie if you can zoom a little bit more so you can maybe focus on maybe the top graph that you have on screen right now, so that we'll be able to maybe go just a little bit deeper. And I saw that you did highlight the detail side of it, so I'm not sure if you're able to zoom in a little bit.
I am. Oh, sorry. Just I had my screen paused and you weren't.
Yeah, so that's very good. So what are we looking at here in the top graph?
Yes, when Prem started talking about a leader that is perhaps not very detailed, is very global in their thinking. They just think of the big picture. What is that doing to the team around them that are saying, well, hang on, we need the detail. And in this particular scenario, this particular person, James Dean, is not only global but high options. That means they much prefer solving the problem than actually spending time explaining the detail. I just want to throw that over the fence and let the team figure that out, which can create a lot of chaos if we don't understand that behavior, or if the team doesn't understand that and go, okay, we need to adjust here because the boss, James Dean, is big picture thinker. He's got something in his mind. We need to figure out the detail. He's not going to give it to us. Okay.
And this is the James Dean, I suppose. Now, one of the things that always stands out to me and that I always have to tell people when I start a debrief is that the green bar is the benchmark, right? So this is really the people who have taken a test before, and it's the average. One of the things that I have noticed is that when the points are outside of that bar, outside of that benchmark, their behavior comes across much more clearly to other people because they are not used to it. So James Dean, for example, people might actually observe him and think, if you look at the last bar there where we say contrary versus consensus, he doesn't have the need to go for consensus with people, to come to agreement. If he sees something wrong, he'll be sure to point it out and to be in some cases just go against the grain because that's the way he's wired. That's the way his behavior has shown up time after time.
Now that could turn out to be a bit confrontational for some people, right? And especially when that person is a leader and they can see the things that could go wrong, they just don't hold back. They let you know the contrary. So there is no filter. They'll let you know. And it's, I think early on we talked a lot about, behavior is not intention. The leader's intention is great. He just wants to share, wants to express themselves to lead the team, but it comes off the wrong way, right? And so this is what this is highlighting in a lot of cases.
And one of the key things with the AccuMatch coaches, I know that people looking at this might say, wow, this is quite a bit of information. We have been doing this for an extended amount of time now. So for us, it's easy to see that, the portion that we're dealing with here is very much self-focused. They like to make decisions based on what they already have in their own mind. They prefer to take actions. They're not the type of person that is going to sit and think about things for a long time, and they're also not likely to leave things. So they like that level of action, and they'll take action very easily, coupled with the fact that when they have to do something, instead of going to the last procedure, they'll generally look for what's the option, what's the easiest way, what's another way of getting something done. You did mention this particular portion is very big picture, right? So it might be very tough for them. Whenever someone starts talking about the details, they get zoned out because they really want to be connected with the bigger picture, and does it make sense there? This portion is motivated by moving towards their goals, so that actually works particularly well when we are coaching people. But their clock tells us that they may not stick with something for an extended amount of time because they have a high need for seeking difference, right? So this type of portion might maybe be focused on something for 3 months, 6 months before wanting to move on to something new. And we did touch on the fact that this particular portion here is probably getting himself into quite a bit of problems by just being, he might even come across as very abrasive as well. I'll give you guys a chance to take a look at the second graph, but that also shows some key behavior.
Yeah, what's interesting with this, is we need to understand a little about how this person is convinced. For instance, this person really needs to read the data, the analytics, in order to be convinced. They are not, if you like, they are not about the relationship with people. They're a lot more about the being in control. And if we tie that with this reading information, their need for control and comes from being convinced about how things are working out. Now, this is just one example. We see so many different maps of different people. In fact, I was on a session yesterday and I just saw a map that we'd never seen anything like it before. And that's the importance of this. We're all unique. There are no two people that are the same that you can put them in a box and say, we're all like this. No, everybody's unique and has different amounts, I guess, of each of these behaviors. And so we need to understand the context of their role. So, I think maybe this person was a leader of an accounting firm, okay? And in that case, you would expect them to want to be focused on the data, the analytics, and so forth, and everything is through their lens of how important the data is. It's just an assumption. I'm not sure what James Dean's map was, but yeah.
But just a quick point here, Nagi. When we look at the convincer channel, sometimes we tend to, because I come convinced with hearing stuff, I put that on my team, or I put that on the individual out there, and I say, why are you not listening to what I'm saying? But that person prefers to have the facts in front of them, and that was a mind-blowing idea as well, because I'm trying to convince that individual what they need to do and show them this is the way to go. But I'm doing it in the wrong way. I'm doing it in a way that they're least likely to be convinced. And it's frustrating sometimes as leaders, as individuals. It's frustrating, and it further emphasized the point as well. When you were talking about when we're talking about labels, people, when we tend to label individuals, their behaviors are different. You may place a particular label on an individual, but that particular individual has those particular individuals have different behaviors that you need to understand with them as well. So you can, when you communicate with them in one straight way, may not get the results. And one of the things I learned from Vishnu as well, Coach Vishnu as well, when he was, talking about it, and he was sharing the experience with him, is that when you begin to see this and have this in front of you, you're able to communicate much more efficiently and much more quicker. You get to the results much more faster. It's because you understand the individual. You can just see the individual or know the individual for a week or so, or you can know an individual for a number of years. And for Coach, when he looks at this here, or when we look at this here, we're able to communicate as if we know that person for a number of years, right? We understand how they communicate. So it's interesting. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that, one of the key things is that it is almost impossible to get frustrated with other people when you become aware of your own behaviors and you realize that other people also have their own specific behavioral pattern, right? And it's no longer that their behavior can affect you in such a way that you get emotional and you start reacting. You can understand what's happening and you can then think about it and you can respond accordingly. That will allow for a win-win situation. Because if we look at, Mr. Dean, for example, he's very future-oriented, visionary, also very optimistic, and logical as well. So because this person sees the future that clearly and understands the different options of how to get there, this person might actually get very frustrated because you can see that under stress, this person will continue to respond logically, may get very frustrated with someone who is more feelings and more emotional. And they might want to beat into their head, well, 1 + 1 is 2. Whereas the only thing that other person is thinking, why are you talking to me in that way? What have I done? And not paying attention to the fact. So very, very good map to actually bring up to see. And, one of the other key things that stands out is that this portion is 0% do, which means that they don't actually need to do something in order to be convinced that they understand how it works. And they might apply that to other people as well. How don't you understand this thing? Because James here would actually read something and understand it, and then thinks that if anybody else also had that same piece of documentation, that they should have understood it as well as he did, right? So very, very important. And Maggie, anything you want to add to this part, or let's take a look at the bottom 1/3 of the graph?
No, I think you've done an awesome job of explaining all of that. So let's keep going. Very, very interesting 100% here. So this person needs not only people around them in their working environment to get up in the morning and be excited to go to work. They also need to be the manager. Right? So, we had a situation actually the other day where there was a team, we were mapping the team, and the manager of that team wasn't, was more instructing, okay? But they had 2 people on the team that were managing. And so those people were constantly complaining that the manager is not a good manager, and it was probably coming from their filter of how they expect management to be, right? So interesting when you start to unpack some of these things, just how easy it is to misunderstand people if we don't do that. I really like what you said earlier, Vishnu, that when you have this information, we almost stop judging. We can't stop judging completely. It's a human nature. But we become more tolerant of and understanding, and we back to what Prem was saying earlier, when you come back to employee engagement, it's all about how the dynamics of the team works that motivates people and accelerates the whole results of the organization because of understanding and collaboration.
Very good. And I think probably the only other things I see on this particular graph here is that a person has a fairly low need for information, and that ties again pretty well with this person's lack of need for procedure and detail. Because if I don't need all the procedures, I don't need all the detail, don't need all that information as well. So that could be something that could also pose a challenge with someone like this. And we in this graph we can see that this person does have the ability to take responsibility for themselves and the team, but there are cases when people score as not managers and as dependents or as independents, where they rather have someone take responsibility for them or only want to take responsibility for themselves. But these people are in management positions, and they wonder, and they keep, they in many cases they actually blame their own team because they don't want to take the responsibility for the team, and then it's very difficult to move forward. And by doing this particular test, it actually allows you to see, okay, where am I right now, and what do I need to do to move up to the next level? Right. So, Prem, anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, it reminded me of when you graph the number of the team members and you see the difference in their behaviors for the entire team, and you see the ones that actually stand out. So you can be able to define the role that individual will play within the team. And you can also understand the dynamic of the culture as well. Where they will lead to and how do they behave within the organization or within the department. So you're able not only to work with an individual, you're able to work with an entire team as well and understand or map their behavior. So you can be able now to make the necessary changes or influence the necessary changes that would be able to get the results. And when you can be so specific with a particular behavior, then you can be able to get the result even faster.
I sometimes think, you can actually customize a team, especially when you know what a position requires. You can actually match people who've made it, as candidates through the final review stage to determine do they actually fit what this position calls for. You see Maggie highlighting their logic. This particular, in the team image there just now, you can see that there's likely to be collusion there because they're all very logical thinking. They might actually forget that they're dealing with other human beings. And the person in yellow, for example, is the one that reacts most emotionally or most with feelings. That portion might actually be seen as the outsider in that team when they're having discussions and it's all flowing very, very logically. Right? Mm-hmm. Maggie, anything you would want to add to that before we move into questions? And I would also ask, if you guys have any questions, please drop it into the chat box. I can see some questions coming to me directly. If you would like everyone to see the questions, feel free to just choose everyone. The ones that you're asking me directly as well, I will ask as the team here on the call just now. But any questions, please feel free to send it. Yes, Maggie.
I was just going to say this team, the coach who's working with them had been working with them for 2 years, and until they actually did the map and he shared their map with them, they didn't realize just how much of a blind spot they had. And so their action plan then was exactly as you said. They started recruiting people that were different and started changing some of their model to be more balanced in a lot of these areas. It was a huge breakthrough for them, right? Especially because they were high achievers. They couldn't see the issues because they were so focused on the results and getting success and so forth. So really big eye opener. Let's take some questions if you like, Vishnu, unless you guys have anything else you want to add.
You have some questions you wanted to start with, or I have two here that came through to the chat to me.
Yeah, you can go with the questions that are coming in.
Right. So how does a person get their own graph?
Do you want me to answer that? So we have a online survey that is basically it's about 50 questions. So to get this level of detail, we have to ask questions from many different perspectives in order to find out how the unconscious mind is working. So it takes about 20-25 minutes to complete. But it gives us lots of clarity. So it's online, basically, is the answer.
Yeah. Then probably the only thing I would add there is, make sure that you set aside that 20-25 minutes to, focus and get those questions answered. Then I see here as well, there's one around, there are two questions that came in that are around the cost of the map, and the question has a follow-on stating that how does this get interpreted? So let me maybe answer for Guyana. I think in Guyana we charge 20,000. Maggie, don't get all shocked, right? It's not 20,000 US dollars. I know when we mention our Guyanese dollars and our prices, usually our colleagues in the US and Canada say, "Wow, how is that possible?" But 20,000 is about 100 US dollars, and that actually includes the test and a 1 hour debrief. So, and if you guys want to add anything else to the debrief or the interpretation, what can people expect?
Yeah, I think the process probably is they do their survey. You send them a coupon, they complete it online, and then you book a debrief, because the amount of information that's there, you don't just get a report. It needs to be walked you through that, just like we did right now. In order to identify the blind spots with you. You can't usually do that for yourself, and that's why you engage with someone like Prem or Vishnu or the team to do that.
And I must also note that this is being broadcast on the AccuMatch global Facebook page as well. And even for us, we have a lot of international people also reaching out to us here in Guyana. But if you are located in Guyana, in the Caribbean and South America, many of the South American countries, but particularly Guyana and the Caribbean, you can reach out to us here at Action Invest, and we'll take you through the process of getting your unique link for you. And as I mentioned, I see another question just came in about the cost. It is in Guyanese dollars 20,000, but it's about equivalent to 100 US, which includes the test and the 1 hour debrief. We can then decide if we work with you on the long term. So if your particular graph really matches what your current occupation is, or if it's when it comes to the relationships, then there might be minimal advice, and maybe one session is more than enough to get you the info that you need to move on. But if you do notice that like the graph we just saw, I think that portion does need quite some assistance. There are programs, 3-month, 6-month programs, where through repetition and through practice of new behaviors, you can actually start shifting your behaviors to behaviors that better serve you. Right? Maggie, anything for the international audience in terms of reaching out and scheduling their own sessions?
Yeah, look, just if you end up on the AccuMatch.bi.com site, then there are a list of coaches around the world that are certified in AccuMatch. It's not a complete list, but if you click on the contact us and ask the question, we can put you in touch with your local coach. Prices vary, obviously, based on currencies and different factors that apply in different countries. So we'll put you in touch with the right person to do that.
Good. Prem, those were the questions I had on my end. Any other questions before you wrap up?
Yeah, I just had one more question in terms of continuous change, and you've seen the behaviors that you're displaying right now. How would an individual continue to have that change? Because we can't just can we just snap our fingers and say we can change his behavior just like that? Or is there a process?
Yeah, we when we do the map, we just supply you with a magic pill. You just take that, you'll be fine. No, the reality is, as you know, it's like uh, uh, fitness and exercise. You can go to the gym for 3 months and actually get some good results, but in order to sustain that, you need to keep working on that. And as Vishnu and you've touched on earlier, uh, we've learned our current behavior through repetition. So in order to learn new behaviors, there has to be repetition. And the latest research from neuroscience journals says it's not about the 30 days as we've been led to believe, it's about the 50 times repetition. So you need to repeat it enough times for it to create the neural nets in our brain that then become myelinated so that they have a shield around them that tells the brain this is a common behavior now, and it becomes automatic unconscious. Still, the before and after that I showed you as well, we also did some case studies where we did the before and after and then took a break to see how much of that came back. And without the maintenance to maintain that, some behaviors that are not practiced enough, or where the old behavior is so strong, you just need a trigger and you end up back into that old pattern. So the continuous maintenance, just like going to the gym, you got to keep it up. As soon as you stop, you'll put on weight, you'll get flabby again, and all of those kinds of wonderful things that we all try to avoid. I'm not talking from my own experience, by the way.
And that's the thing. That's the thing with behavior, right? If you're 20 years old right now or 30 years old right now, you have 30 years of behavior behind you that you've gotten very comfortable with. And if you want different results, you can't keep doing the same things that you've been doing, right? You'll need to see, well, what are the options? And then, plot out a plan and follow it religiously so that you can get that longer term change in behavior.
I think,
yeah. I think, sorry. I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt, but you can't just think about it. It's the behavior. You got to act it out. You got to do it. A lot of people say, well, I meditate every day and I think about what I'm going to do. Yes, it's wonderful. That's just the foundation. But it's the action. Your brain only creates those neural pathways when you act it out. That's why behavior intelligence is so important. Be behavior intelligent. Yeah. Sorry, Graham.
No, that's fine. And just to realize that in our lives we would have gone through traumatic experiences or experiences that would, that encouraged us. Our behaviors are stemmed from those events, and our behaviors are not all positive. They are negative behaviors there. It's just to be able to identify it, and it stems from our childhood. It comes way from there, and it just programs us to react or to look, or it shapes our perspective or our worldview, whatever it is, our mental model, and you tend to look now at situations in your own way. So bringing that now to your light, and you understand, or to your awareness, and you understand how you look at stuff, then you can be able to look at life from an objective perspective, and you can be able to make that assessment and know, okay, I am reacting in this kind of way, and I choose now. I have an option, and I can be able to be much more in control of my emotions, be much more control of the circumstances that I find myself in. So that's something that's so important in your behavior, understanding your behavior within your team and within your life. Yep.
Can I just add something to that, Prem? Yep. We've often used to call it past conditioning, right? And past conditioning, okay, what does that really mean? Can you be more specific? That just sounds like a vague term, right? And even as you're talking that, when you say you're behaving negatively. Well, you know, the behavior is actually a result of multiple points on that graph. It's not a single point that it's behavior on its own. It's the combination of things that show up as a behavior. You know, we saw the map earlier of the person, James Dean, who is high global, high options, high contrary, you know, and so it's that whole combination that we observe as, God, you know, this leader is just all over the place, and you can't talk to him about it because it's just confrontational, right? So behavior gets this vague label or judgment about it, but it's a specific combination that we need in order to understand it and unpack it, right?
Right. All right. So, any last words, Vish?
Well, I think other than people who really want to move themselves ahead, who want to understand themselves much better and really unlock their potential, make a lot of improvements, other than people like that, I think this will be very useful for anybody who's in the people management, people development field. So could be a coach, consultant, could be an HR manager, HR supervisor. I'm thinking even NGOs and organizations that have to serve people a lot. Sometimes you wonder, why do people keep behaving the way they do? To have them take the test, and you'll clearly see black and white why they do what they do. So I think I wanted to make that very clear. For us, we are coaches, so this is a fantastic tool. It doesn't take us a year to understand the person we're working with. Before they even come and sit with us physically in our office or virtually via Zoom, this is one of the first things that has to be done so that we know who we are dealing with, and we can really serve them to the best of our abilities to get them the results really fast. Because we all know that people want results, and having the right tools and utilizing the right tools is exactly what will allow you to get those results really quickly. So guys, I have to jump off. Prem, thank you very much for the opportunity. Maggie, as always, it's really great to be in your presence. So I look forward to joining you guys again soon, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Prem. Thanks, Vishnu.
All right, Maggie, any last words?
No, I think this was great.
That's all.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to converse and express our background and thinking around this. I think, what Vishnu just said, I had a webinar, a training session with some of the coaches in Asia yesterday, and two of our newest coaches both said, this just cuts through so much time that they would normally take to get to know their client, that it's just instant, from day one. So, yeah.
All right, guys. Just my final thoughts on this. This is something that will, for those of you who are interested in developing themselves and growth, you have that growth mindset. This is a tool that you can be able to assess yourself and your company as well, your team. And to be able to get on to us, there's always you can message us at our telephone number 223-5583, and also there's a website. So what we'll do, we'll just put a link at the bottom of this video, and you can maybe be able to make contact with us. All right, thanks for joining us, and I trust that this was something of value to you, and you can be able to it can be able to make a difference in your life. All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Prem.
Thank you. Bye.